How's it going? Welcome to this new episode of the Alex TV show. As you can see, I have a guest, and I have the great pleasure and honor of having Patrick Vargas from Chile, an integrative therapist and naturopath. How are you, Patrick? Thank you for accepting my invitation.
Yes, I'm delighted to be here with you. I also appreciate the invitation, and even more so the information we're going to share regarding people who have already researched the cases we've published on social media platforms.
That's right. Thank you very much. And by the way, I want to mention at the start of the video that all the information you give me, Patrick, I will publish both in the video description and in a pinned comment at the top. You can decide off camera whether you want to share your channel or any information about the services you offer. And I'd like to start with this question. It seems to me that especially you focus a lot on regression, right? Past lives and matters related to astral experiences. I don't know if you could tell us a little bit about this, please.
Yes, that's right. For example, here in our practice, well, we have a natural medicine health center. We're a multidisciplinary team, and we use various techniques. However, in the last 2 years, the use of has increased a lot. Interdimensional hypnosis or remote viewing. The main reason is that there are many complications in human beings that haven't found answers, neither from the medical field nor from other psychological approaches or from the way humans interact with their surroundings and environment. And that's where, with this interdimensional hypnosis, we identify intrusions from subtle planes, from entities, and even from various races. They are causing complications in humans with the aim of observing their energy, sometimes for specific projects, and that's what's so striking. So people have found answers through the sessions that are published. They've identified with many situations happening at home, intrusive thoughts, sleep paralysis, and various symptoms resulting from the manifestation of astral entities.
Okay, perfect. So this type of regression is, I imagine, a bit different from traditional past life regression, which is, I'm saying this because I don't know how to do it, but I've been part of sessions with other therapists who have done it with me, where you fall into a state of relaxation, start to access the unconscious, and go on to discover these memories that aren't conscious, but somehow they are still present in the unconscious. The mechanism itself is highly debated, whether this information is out there somewhere like a kind of cloud or whether it's inside us, in our cells and everything. I think there are several theories about it. But in your case, is it also about accessing memories, or what would you call it? How do we make the dimensional leap to understand and access where these entities are controlling your patients, your clients?
Yes, first we need to understand that classical hypnosis or regressive hypnosis, while valid for therapeutic work, is very different from interdimensional hypnosis. In the latter case, the goal is to investigate exactly when the intrusion of these particular entities began, which usually happens lifetimes ago or several reincarnations back. It's there that a pact is ultimately made. An agreement, the goal is to find out what pact or agreement was made that allowed this entity to be stalking the person and causing the chaos that can manifest psychologically, physically, or in other areas. So it's not really about showbiz, like whether you were, so to speak, a king, a princess, or a beggar. That's not the focus. Although it can give you an explanation about how what exists in a past life is related to what you're experiencing now, paying for, or what they are receiving in this current life. But that's a more new age approach where there are also certain traps, because it doesn't let you see what's really behind it, how there are controllers over this earth hologram, how they design the life of each human being in every incarnation. That's what classic regressions show us. That's what classic hypnosis reveals. So the goal is to go to the etiology, to the origin of what is conditioning the person's well-being in their current life path.
Okay, yes, I understand well. And sorry if you don't correct me. In some way, this regression brings us, as you say, to the moment when surely we don't remember it, surely not consciously, we made some kind of agreement. Let's take an example. 4 lives ago, I want to have money, I want to have health, I want to have this position, I want to have power, because typically it's a symbiotic relationship, right? With these entities, I mean, you give me, and I really liked how you explained it with Luis in one of your videos, where you explained that these entities, deities, I call them entities based on worship and exchange, are able to modify this physical reality, right? I mean, they already have ways they've developed, and that's why they can provide these kinds of situations, although they almost never keep their end of the bargain. So my recommendation is never get involved with witchcraft, with making requests, with let's ask this saint or that one, because that's not the way. A truly evolved entity, I don't want to call it a being of light, but an entity with clear vision, doesn't give out gifts. It's not here to solve your life for you, right? They would start with others. Thank you. They would start with others who need it more than we do. So In some way, you go back, for example, 3 or 4 lives ago, and the nature of the pact made with this entity becomes clear. In my case, I have also worked on breaking these alliances. They have many names: alliances, limiting beliefs, and so on. And I've been told that many times they are renewed, particularly while sleeping, that you have to make a conscious effort, because sometimes you're so used to this entity that already had you in a certain way. You're already their client, you break away, and then they come back, and in this unconscious state of sleep, somehow you might fall into recontracting, into making this agreement again, which isn't a contract in the traditional sense. It's not something you sign, but rather an agreement. And somehow, once again, you need this cleansing that comes with your therapy. I don't know what you think about that.
That's right. Just as you mentioned, for example, witchcraft. In witchcraft, of course, if someone is identified or told that they've been the target of this kind of work, they're obviously going to look for someone, a spiritual hitman, shaman, witch, whoever, to try to reverse that condition or that spell. The regressive or archontic entities, as that term is also used, are the masters of deception. Therefore, of course, the person is going to seek out a service to rid themselves of this spell. However, that therapist, guide, guru, or shaman also has an entity attached to them at that moment. As long as they remain unaware of it, that entity will create the right conditions, perhaps even coordinating with the entity attached to the person seeking help to greatly increase the harassment and stalking. The person may feel some benefit from the intervention of this new sorcerer in the short or medium term. However, as you just mentioned, the one who always wins is the regressive entity. It's not the human. They will always get the biggest share out of this. And when someone starts seeking this external help, they stop recognizing their own divinity. And you expose yourself or expose your own sovereignty to whatever is out there intervening in your life path. It takes control. And of course, if we are even more unaware of the original pact or the agreement made hundreds of lifetimes ago, the entity in question will always be there. But something curious also happens. If I approach a sorcerer, for example, who has a more powerful hierarchical entity, that entity can take control of the person. Or it can subdue the entity that the person already has so that it works for the hierarchy. Each case is unique. Each case is striking. And the way these entities deceive, subjugate, implant, or place devices, engrams, or various conditioning factors to steer the person into that basic archontic project is remarkable.
So, from the way you put it, I think we can venture to say that a high percentage of humanity, in one way or another, must have some kind of implants. I mean, I talk about it and say it without any problem. Not that I consider myself less or more, but sometimes, especially when I face challenging situations. Recently, about a month ago, I had a serious car accident. It was serious, and my car was a total loss. You can imagine it was a bad accident. And right there, Patrick, immediately, but I don't see entities or anything like that. It's completely intuitive. I felt like they gathered, and that's when you say they were lying in wait. They were lying in wait. I had a bad day. I fall into fear. I almost die. I start worrying because of the other person in the accident too. Then my family arrives. My kids get scared. All this mix. And immediately I feel the entities. And in my case, even though I also work with people who do things similar to what you do, I also try to work with my own intuition, like you said. And the next day, after I got some sleep, the fear subsided a bit. I saw that, well, life goes on, nothing worse happened, and the entities left. I mean, maybe they didn't like it anymore, They didn't like that I was no longer in fear, in panic, that I was no longer vibrating in those emotions that I'm sure they feed on, right? So on my channel, that's something I really like to recommend, that we need to leave those kinds of emotions behind, right? I mean, thank you. Not in a forced way, like, I don't want to be afraid, I want to be brave. No, but rather to understand that all these kinds of situations are where these entities take advantage of our challenging circumstances. For example, if you're lacking money, if you're lacking health, so don't give them an opening and work on that ourselves without looking for easy ways out, like witchcraft, for example, or even but just praying continuously, because what are you asking for? It's just that I asked, I prayed, yes. But do you really think that a truly celestial being, a being so divine, a God, though I don't really like that word, I prefer the word creator, because the creator made us, gave us everything, but he's not the dad who's spoiling us. Rather, he's the dad who respects us and gives us power. He says, you don't keep asking me, you want a new job, go look for it, you need more money, earn it. But we do have that situation because of religions, of constantly asking him for things. And personally, I'm a Catholic, but I no longer practice. And when I've recently gone to churches for funerals, for weddings, and so on, which is the only time I go, since I no longer participate in the ritual, I observe the ritual. I see it's incredible the amount of symbolism and the number of things that are present. And my question is, who are they doing this for now? Because this definitely doesn't sound to me like a creator, a god. If we're constantly being asked to bow down, to victimize ourselves, to blame ourselves, and the ritual is incredible to me since you observe it as an observer and no longer as a practitioner.
And also an irate God who rewards or punishes you. That's right. So there are so many inconsistencies, but it's important for human beings to reflect, to investigate, to be able to discern. But unfortunately, as a result of the social engineering by those in power, they promote a system, an indoctrination through various channels. Therefore, that's what starts conditioning the person. And they have the concept of what they have to think, say, do, how to dress. So of course, it's difficult to remove that dogma, that belief from a person. And since it's so deeply rooted that we are so tiny, so insignificant, we feel we need something outside ourselves to guide us toward some kind of miracle or manifestation of help. And that's not the case. So we have to consider that this prison, which is controlled by these regressive entities, is a holographic prison. Before we enter it, we are essence, we are wholeness, wisdom, love, we are gods. If you want to call it that, but they fragment us in order to manipulate us, study us, and even try to replicate our light gene. Therefore, they will use every strategy necessary to make us identify with physicality and with what the system offers, which is designed by them. That's why it's hard for us to believe that we are capable of creating or modifying reality, even though, interestingly, quantum physics explains that you can modify reality. But still, of course, these beliefs, these dogmas persist. This imposition of ideologies or ideals is precisely to steer you toward a more earthly plane, to keep you more attached to physicality, to the 3D. But when you start to empower yourself to know that you are wholeness, that you are divinity, that these beasts should fear you and not the other way around, the game changes. That's when we talked with Luis about hacking the matrix. It can be done, but you have to empower yourself, and that's knowledge. But before you reach that knowledge, the system comes in to distract you with lots of stimuli, with entertainment, with movies, and interestingly, it gives you negative priming so that you ridicule even more anything that could lead to an opening of consciousness. The good thing is that there are groups of people who have already gone beyond that and are incorporating information, and they're realizing how this system is manipulated, not just on a physical level, but also on what lies beyond the physical.
Oh, yes, I wholeheartedly and completely agree with that sentiment. I also think that the way out, well, that's how I see it. The real way out is when we're no longer in the physical. That's where I think the exit can happen, and it's arriving with an empty plate. In other words, what does it mean to arrive without any kind of resentment? Even with these entities, if you tell me, look, I'm not from here, I'm leaving now. I mean, you had me for a while, but now I'm leaving, that's it. I know that I can leave first being convinced of that and knowing our essence, that our essence operates outside of this system, right? Now, in the physical sense, what does that mean? As long as we haven't left our bodies, as long as we're in this flesh, well, a bit like Louise mentions, I also like the idea of making the most of this reality, of trying to be your best version. And for example, with money, it's about mastering money and not letting money master you. Well, somehow achieving that, right? Money is such a curious energy because there are people who have little money and live extremely well. There are people who have a lot of money and are suffering. Why? Because they're not mastering the energy. They might have a lot of money, but they want even more. They need more. Physically, they are totally, I would call it, the word is slipping my mind, forgive me. The word is we're like addicts to money, to pleasures, as you said, and also to entertainment. And I feel like it's all about focus. It's all a reaction. For example, I know that in Chile, people really like soccer, just like here in Mexico. So it's fine to go watch Chile, to go see Colo Colo, that's fine. But if you don't also give your energy, and for example, if your team loses, you shouldn't fall into anger or take it out on a fan of the other team, that kind of thing. Instead, just say, I came, I had fun, it doesn't matter if they won or lost, and that's it, I'm going home. I think that's how we can master what this reality offers us, and not necessarily have a life like Buddhists or Tibetans, like a hermit, wanting to lock myself away in a monastery with no TV, no internet, no books, nothing, not talking to anyone. Because yes, in a way, everything external, as you said, if we put our solution there, you have to look inside, you have to find it within yourself, and you can complement yourself, right? Like this information that you share and everything, it's excellent, but in the end, everyone has to go within and discover their own essence, and I feel that process is personal. We rely on this information, but in the end, it's something that has to be felt inside. I am, as you say, sometimes it sounds a bit arrogant to say we are gods, but it's that we are all that. We all come from that. We are here, but we are not from here, as it was said, as Jesus Christ used to say. That's the part I really like about his story, that they said he came to share information, not so much to free us or anything more than that.
Exactly, that's knowledge. Knowledge allows you to have clarity, to discern, to know how to filter the information that comes from outside, and it's part of the process to participate, I don't know, in some kind of doctrine or belief. It's all part of the process. But we have to start activating our feeling, which is one of the many pieces of information we get in session. The beings of light that show up there, obviously they're verified because these same regressive entities can pretend to be beings of light. So, the brains that accompany us in session really emphasize activating feeling and turning off the mind, which is fundamental. The mind is the main device that these archontic entities use. They control us through the mind. The most extreme cases we've seen here in consultations are when people come in saying they hear voices that urge them to do self-destructive things, self-harm, hurt themselves or hurt others. Clear and specific voices, demonic voices. So we have many cases. All the sessions that are published there on YouTube are all different. When you start watching the sessions, you begin to understand the dynamics, how the regressive entities start to manipulate humans, how they begin to deceive them. And that empowers humans even more. That is part of knowledge. So you won't just buy into what the system is selling you anymore. Just as you said, if you're going to do some group activity, you'll already know how to protect yourself. How not to become part of an egregore or a particular vibration, toxic or negative, where entities take advantage of that group of people to extract their energy or parasitize them. So it's not about isolating yourself from the world. And on the other hand, as you mentioned, the goal isn't about finding your mission either, which is something that comes from the New Age, always searching for a mission. And there are people who spend their whole lives and never find their mission. That's why we need to put things in perspective. If this is a holographic prison for which there is a lot of evidence, as Salvador Freixedo and others have mentioned, the goal is to get out of the prison. That's the underlying point. But to get out of the prison, you need knowledge. Who controls the prison? How do these controllers manipulate? And through what means? These controllers also manipulate through guides, gurus, mediums, contactees, and so on. Knowing this, you'll clearly see that all your power is inside you, that you don't need anything from outside. And when you activate it, the beasts move away, the beasts leave. And that's how it is. Many people write to me, for example, saying they're experiencing the famous sleep paralysis. They feel like something climbs onto their chest, like the dead climbs on you, as they say in Mexico. Or they see an entity. When they're paralyzed, they see entities inside the room. The famous tall, dark man with a hat and cape, or an animal with red eyes, and they only see those glowing eyes. So when a person starts to take in this information, they become empowered, they program themselves before going to sleep, they gain confidence and face the entity with complete sovereignty. And be careful. It's not about saying, get out of here, don't be in my house, I don't allow you, I don't authorize you. No, it's beyond that. The person needs to become aware, to activate a fire that comes from the heart center and project it forward, toward the beast or throughout the entire room. And that entity must be pulverized, burned, eliminated. These are regressive entities, there is no other option. They must be eliminated. So when you hear someone say, no, they speak to you as part of the deception. There are many contactees, guides, mediums, you name it, and they mix truths with lies, which is part of the deception. 80% truth and 20% lies. They might tell you, yes, if you see an entity, empower yourself. Confront it, tell it to leave, that you don't give it permission, you don't authorize it, of course. And you see it and think, ah, perfect, I empowered myself. Yes, the entity left, they tell you. But the entity isn't something that's going to say, yes, excuse me, I didn't mean to implant you, I didn't want to harm you, see you, I'll never come back. No, that's a deception. The entity stays, it applies another protocol to stalk the human, to implant them. Oh, the human saw me, realized it. Perfect. Then now it will make sure you don't see it. And it keeps paralyzing you, placing the implant, opening portals in your home. Thank you. Or to the family, and so on.
Yes, that's very important information you're sharing. I wanted to ask you a question. It's a bit difficult, but what do you think? Why does that happen to some people? For example, maybe an entity came to visit them. Maybe they already knew each other from before, some prior agreement. Sometimes it has to do with things like the physical environment. For instance, the entity was already in the house. You moved into that house and, well, here we go. There's a possible that it can stalk you, because I've noticed that when situations like that happen, for example, after a deep sadness, a strong anger, an event, or several events, those entities, similar to what happened with my accident, I feel like they lurk and say, now is the time, now this person is unprotected, and that's when they try to attack you in your darkest moment. That's why maybe it's important to work on, if you experience a loss, if you're going through something, if you're suffering from financial or medical troubles, not letting yourself get so low, so you can keep maintaining that protection. Because it's clear that they don't reach 100% of people. Those stories are plentiful, but there are people who say, I've never experienced that. What do you think could make us more susceptible?
All the possibilities are there. Because of course there could be a geographic location, a house, an area that's heavily infested, where in the past, maybe years or even centuries ago, some dark, low-frequency activity took place, or maybe a disembodied spirit, whether voluntarily or not, was removed from the game and that energy remained imprinted there. Even little animals, that too. The thing is, the basic thing to understand is that every human being upon entering this holographic prison has one or several entities assigned to them. If, along the way, this entity manages to take advantage and carry out its underlying project with the human, it will do so life after life. But as I mentioned before, if for some reason the person requests it, because these entities seek consent, if the human asks for something through a petition, prayer, invocation, lights a candle, and it's possible that a heavier, more hierarchical entity arrives and takes possession of that human. So we always have an entity over us as a baseline. Why? Because we are on narcotic ground. We are just visitors here. And that's why knowledge allows you to understand what this game is about, to empower yourself and to free yourself. Of course, it's not that the entities will stop looking for you. There will be others that notice you because you're vacant, you don't have entities over you. But knowledge itself will prevent them from taking possession of you. Knowledge itself will keep you from carrying out any actions that would allow these beasts to intrude. That's important. That's vital. But the first thing is to understand what the game is about. Who are the controllers? This is something that ancient civilizations also spoke about. The texts found in Najamar and in Egypt around the year 50, apocryphal texts. Jesus also specifically mentioned this. What happens when you die and entities appear trying to sell you something that isn't real? So, when you leave the hologram, there's also the famous tunnel of light, the deceased relatives. But most of these are holographic images being projected. These same entities are there to deceive you. They are the kings of deception. That's basically a summary of how they manipulate us and make us come back to this hologram over and over again. But the time is now to become aware, so we don't return to this game that most of us chose to enter of our own free will. But the game is so well structured in favor of these archons that we end up staying here. We forget life after life that we are divinity, that we are gods, we are creators. And we identify with the physical and return again and again and again.
Yes, what you're saying really resonates with me. In fact, I just made a video in my capsule series about the book you mentioned, which I think is known as the Secret Book of Thomas, the Gnostic Bible, etc. I think it was found in the year 45. And yes, with this gnosis or this information that, as you rightly say, thank you, we are where we are and what the rules of the game are. What came to mind when you mentioned it a bit was the Soviet Union. I never went while it was still the Soviet Union. I only went after it became Russia. But they used to say that if you arrived in the Soviet Union, for example, by plane, they would assign a KGB agent to follow you, at least at first, to your hotel, to make sure you weren't a spy, whether you were there for a visit as a tourist or for work. So it sounds kind of similar to me, like we arrive in this world and we have our assigned archon, our assigned entity who's sort of evaluating us, following us, trying to exploit us. Another thing I mentioned is that in some way they have to respect the rule of free will. In some way they need to have our consent, right? And it's incredible that we give it to them if we fall prey to the game of the matrix, which is addiction. Addiction to pleasures, addiction to money, the focus on the physical, which means fear of death, and excessive focus on doing anything just to maintain or extend, to maintain health or prolong life. And to stop being afraid of death, understanding that it's not really death because it's just a simple change, like one day you're wearing one pair of pants and the next day you're wearing something else. And understanding that at that point of transition called death, we go to the astral plane, and that's where the exit is for me. It's not easy, for sure, it's very difficult, but I think the basic point, the starting point is to reach the astral plane, training yourself your whole life, preparing for the moment of your death, so that when you arrive, you know that you are a divine spark. You know that inside your soul there is a spirit, and that spirit is a divine spark, and that divine spark can leave. And I've heard so many versions, Patrick, that there's a physical dome, an electromagnetic dome, and that there's no way out. People have told me there's no way. And I tell them, I think that if you say there's no way, I'm sorry, but I have a different idea. That there is a way, there really is a way. And yes, for sure. I'm not saying that I'm going to do it, but I'm preparing myself day by day so that when that moment comes, if my choice, my request, my desire, my being wants to leave this system, because in the end, I think they convince you, Patrick. As you rightly say, yes, first of all, what you've said, I totally agree. They present you with Jesus Christ, with the Prophet Muhammad. It's not them at the beginning. I mean, no matter how much you worship them, they're not. Then if that doesn't work, if, for example, your mother has passed away, your father has passed away, or a child has passed away, some really difficult situation, they come and present you with these holograms. But it's not really them either inviting you to go with them to heaven or something like that to awaken you because they're controlling you. Before that, they're somehow reading you, probably with the entities you had attached to you. They're reading you to see how you'll react. And in the end, I think it's a game of saying, no, thank you. No, I know where I'm going. Just let me go. I'm leaving. And many say that if you arrive with that conviction, they don't even try much. They say, no, not this one, let this one go, because in the end, we're not going to get them back in. What do I think? That the reincarnation process is there. And they somehow try to tell you, look, I know that you already know how things are, but go back one more time to fix things you did, which isn't true because we'd never finish, Patrick. Do you agree?
Exactly, yes. It's one of the great archontic strategies, masters of deception. They make heavy use of reincarnation. In the past, humans had an average lifespan of about 100 years. However, of course, it was more likely, or the possibility was greater, for humans to acquire knowledge and understand what this holographic cage is all about. But then, of course, the archontic entities reduce that lifespan. No matter how much awareness a person gains, these regressive entities have this last resort to reset your mind, erase everything you've learned. Curiously, the New Age tells you that you come here to evolve, to acquire knowledge, but then they erase it all. So, there's also a consequence, and they barely delve into this topic themselves. They'll tell you that reincarnation is just a distraction. If you knew you were a father, left a child in your previous life, or had unresolved issues, then it would overwhelm you. Don't pay attention to it. It's not vital to understand what reincarnation is about and how it's a favorite mechanism, or one of the favorite mechanisms, of regressive entities to keep humans returning, to wipe their minds so they don't remember if at some point they almost open their eyes, wake up, become aware. So they erase everything and you start from zero again. So this is a strategy that these beasts use very often. It never fails them. But when you leave empowered, when you exit this game, you shed your physical suit and start resonating with what you truly are in essence. You begin to leave the D. Unfortunately, though, you have to pass through the D, where these entities are, in order to continue on to the dimension that matches your vibrational frequency. But before you can recognize that frequency and vibration, they will show you all these archetypal figures, the disembodied relative. If you left with a particular belief when you died, if you carried some current belief with you, they will take it and use it to manipulate you. So it's not easy, but it is possible. You can get out of this hologram, and it has to do with pure knowledge. It's not about mysticism, it's about knowledge. It's not, as you mentioned, about meditating from 6 in the morning, going to a mountain dressed in white with a turban, lighting candles or incense. That's not pure knowledge. Those New Age habits, you'll lose them in your next life. They don't contribute to your escape from the holographic prison. Only knowledge empowers you, but for that, you need to understand what the game is about and who controls it.
Yes, I totally agree. I don't see everything about New Age as bad. There are some concepts I might agree with, but it's like turning this into a religion, like wanting to say, if you don't follow this method, if you don't do all these steps, you're doomed. And I completely disagree with that. An intuitive person, someone could simply go with the flow, get to know themselves, understand that they are a divine spark. They don't need anything at all. And simply, as you said, they reach the astral and know they will go to the dimension, or rather the frequency that they are meant to go to, right? But I think that's precisely where it gets interesting, Patrick, the astral. There is just so much talk and speculation about the astral. For example, I've been told that the astral was specifically designed by the archons with the purpose of attaching it to this physical reality. However, others will say that the astral planes, or you could call them energetic dimensions, are actually connected whenever you have these physical experiences. Exactly. Because that's where, in a way, we have this double body, let's call it that. I mean, we're in the physical, but we're also in the astral in a certain way, right? So much so that it's said that the famous astral travels, for example, that's also why I feel there are people who say, I saw my grandfather and all that. Well, maybe you saw him in the astral, in dreams. Maybe you traveled to the astral, you were dreaming, you were in the astral, and your grandfather is perhaps disincarnate and wandering in the astral, which is not really something advisable, right? Because I do feel that the astral is something transitory, So being disincarnate in the astral means you're neither reincarnating nor have you moved on, and you're just there for a while, often wanting to return to the life you no longer have. Maybe you were very attached, maybe you were successful, had money, maybe you were doing really well, you were happy, and then you die suddenly, an accident, a quick illness, etc. And you stay there in the astral saying, I want to go back, I want that life, I don't want it to end, but at that point, there's absolutely no way to return. So what specific recommendations could you possibly give if, for example, we unexpectedly find ourselves on an actual astral journey, or in some other way, for those individuals who successfully manage to get there? I don't know. What are the concrete steps that we can take to effectively protect ourselves and completely avoid any potential problems or negative encounters with these kinds of entities?
In a way, there is a significant push on social media, and there are even some tutorials on how to have astral journeys. While there are people who can do it innately, there is a risk because in the end, you are surrendering yourself to a dimension where these beasts roam freely, where it is comfortable for them to operate. It's like when we go to sleep, you also mentioned sleep, when we are most vulnerable to attacks. Of course, we are defenseless, and we attribute everything happening there to something dreamlike, something magical, or to imagination, or a mental process generating random images. But that's not the case, because you are exposing yourself to the astral, you are exposing yourself to the entities that are there. That's why I want to reiterate the importance of understanding how the hologram works, or what these regressive entities are that are always lurking. So, just as an altered state of consciousness exposes or serves a person up on a silver platter to the astral or to regressive entities, when you already have the knowledge, you won't give away the sovereignty of your own divinity or your being. Therefore, you won't buy into everything they're selling out there. No matter how benevolent some figure or luminous being may appear, you won't accept any kind of contract. These agreements that one makes with these regressive entities are not explicit in the sense that they come and say, I'm here to stalk you, I'm here to implant something in you, do you allow me? No, it's not like that. They will look for a way for you to accept. For example, many people have a very curious dream. They dream that they are at home and the doorbell rings and it's the mailman. The mailman brings them a package, a gift, a bag. He hands them something. By accepting it, you are making an agreement. So this vision or this dream that seems so innocent, accepting something out there in the dream world, is actually making an agreement with these beasts. So there are 1,000 ways these beasts will try to get you to give them permission to stalk you. They always seek consent. It's part of the agreements between light and darkness, of the harmonies that exist between the different dimensions or within creation. They will always try to get you to allow them access. And obviously, that's what we don't know, because we already gave it to them many lifetimes ago. We don't know how it happened, why it happened, or under what circumstances it occurred. Therefore, this subjects us, or subjects most human beings in this current lifetime. And that's what needs to be discovered. That's what we do with interdimensional hypnosis, to find out what's behind it. And once it is discovered, obviously the elimination of the beasts takes place, which are usually groups, from the hierarchy down to their pawn. They are eliminated. The implants, artifacts, and devices that are causing mental complications in the person are removed, as well as any harm to their health, any conflict in their environment, in the dynamics with their family. All of this is induced by these beasts who feed on that suffering, that pain, that mistreatment, that anguish. They feed on that low-frequency energy, that endoplasmic energy.
Yes. I totally agree that this is their food. And that's why I like to suggest, don't get angry, don't hold grudges. Let's not always try to have a positive outlook on everything, because if you don't, no matter what, you're giving them energy. And a guest from Argentina once told me this. She put it perfectly about the New Age. She said, you go to all these things, meditate, use crystals, group meditation, whatever, and then you get home and yell at your kids, fight with your husband and everything. So what did you achieve? What kind of balance did you achieve? No, that's just inconsistent. Or you go out in traffic and start yelling at everyone to get out of the way, or honking your horn or something like that. I mean, I understand that I can't be perfect, but you can at least try to have an intention to somehow understand how they want to keep us. And I feel that what happened in 2020 was a multifaceted plan from them, coming from many directions. It wasn't just a medical situation. They tried to force families to stay together. They encouraged high alcohol consumption because of the fear and pressure everyone was under. Many people lost their jobs, their businesses, and everything. So all of that creates uncertainty, it creates fear, and so on. In a way, they tried to break the harmony that existed, right? And absolutely, just like you said, of course they pick up on it. And it's something that can be so very hard to understand, that when you're vibrating with that anger, or when you're vibrating with that deep annoyance, when you're not actively trying to go about your day in the best possible way, calmly and peacefully, you are essentially giving your energy to them. You're feeding them that energy. And just like you said, they will then seek you out in some way. But there's something you said that's really important. I feel like there are people who don't understand why things happen to them, Patrick. And the only conclusion I come to is that they've made these contracts beforehand, totally. They just don't know it. Somehow they've made pacts they're unaware of. They don't have the conscious mind right now to say, well, I came to this life and I'm going to go through hardships constantly. I'm going to be in conflict and all that. And I feel like it can be broken, like you said, by saying no more. Or I did it right, but I don't want to do it anymore. Or I did it in confusion, I did it, etc. But my will is I break. And I don't know if you have any suggestions or if it absolutely has to be done with dimensional hypnosis, because you do have to be careful, for example, with sayings or mantras, not to be speaking to an entity, but to be speaking with our own energy. I'm not connecting to anyone, etc. I'm not relying on anyone. I'm simply stating my will, that I break these contracts, I break these agreements, I break these beliefs, and I am free from these commitments. I don't know what you think about that. Paper?
We need to develop the habit and the drive to connect with our own essence, to recognize it as a whole, not just to know it in theory, but to truly grasp that we have the ability to create our own reality. Because a lot of people know this. They say, yes, we are gods, we are children of the Creator, we are a fractal of the Source, and so on. But then they go around invoking, using symbols, worshipping, or they perform rituals, so it's not consistent. So the more you stimulate and acknowledge your divine capacity, the more you'll be able to create, defend yourself, attack, and eliminate these beasts. It can be done. You mentioned families, for example, people who don't understand why their lives are in chaos, especially when they know they haven't harmed anyone. They behave well, help others, try to keep harmony at home, avoid arguments, but things still go wrong for them. Something happens. Of course, we might say it's the will of the Creator, of the Father, that this person should suffer. So that's when we see that there are these agreements from past life timelines, which cause through that suffering, anguish, and difficult times for the person, that disharmony, these entities feed off it, experiment with the person, continue implanting things in them and their family group, depending on the archontic project that the archontic entity in question has. So the very fact of being in this holographic prison already indicates that we have, as a personal mark, some regressive entity, and that's what needs to be identified on an individual basis. Of course, it can be done. The process will take a bit longer, but it is possible. It is possible because we all come from the same source. We all have that ability. But we have to unlearn in order to learn, shed dogmas and beliefs, and start activating what we have by essence, that which transcends from life to life. That is what needs to be activated. But while that happens, or looking at another option, of course, we apply this technique and also help. Ultimately, it's a backdoor, precisely to be able to free the person from the subjugation of these entities. However, as with any therapeutic process, there is a percentage of responsibility on the part of the person to maintain the connection with their light, with their essence. That has to do with knowledge, because of course I can cleanse myself, I can apply the technique or do it on my own, but then I might start invoking, asking, praying, or carrying some little medal or figure, and once again you mortgage your sovereignty, you're giving belief to something external and not believing in your own power, and that is key. That's why nowadays, in this latest era, there are many so-called New Age influencers who are giving information or tutorials so that you can connect with Pleiadians, Arcturians, or the spaceship that's on its way, which is just another way of submitting yourself to something extra physical and stopping yourself from recognizing and doing the responsible work of finding the way back home, but by activating what you are in essence. Although, as I mentioned, the New Age does have important elements because it gives you a much broader, more holistic explanation, and it provides a certain sense of comfort regarding what a person is experiencing day to day. That's fine. But that's also where these identities take advantage, slipping in truths mixed with lies. In the past, religion, beliefs, and dogmas worked very well for them through that style or approach, but people started to question things along the way, so they had to update themselves and look for another way to keep deceiving, tricking, and enchanting people with words of peace, love, and harmony so that the flock wouldn't escape. And that's what's happening now. But when you realize that everything is within you, you have to activate it, not just, as I mentioned before, in theory, but by putting it into action. As the ancient shamans of Mexico used to say, you have to stalk yourself, be disciplined. The work is daily, and discipline doesn't mean meditating from sunrise to sunset. That's not what it's about. It's about knowledge and watching yourself, stalking your own attitudes. By essence, human beings are light, peace, harmony, love, tranquility, wisdom. All of that is what we are at our core. But when we have an intrusive thought, when we have a toxic attitude, as you mentioned, When we yell at our family, at a child, when we have a negative attitude, we need to immediately sound the alarms, because that is not part of our essence. There is something there influencing us to have that attitude. When you make that separation, you step out of the situation, you can observe what is happening, you can easily detach and not get caught up in that action, which will prevent you from generating the emotion that the quantum entity expects you to give it. And that makes all the difference.
Yes, I totally agree. And you know what I feel, Patrick? It's like when you don't have confidence in yourself, like you said, how could I not have the little medal? I mean, now that I mention it, right? How could I not have the image of the saint or things like that? Because first of all, we've all been programmed with this idea that we're less, that we're not on that level. And then if you say, yes, you are on that level, I mean, you are a divine spark, you are on that level, but it's not like you should have a medal with your face on it either. That's the part that's really complicated to explain. It doesn't mean that now you are Archangel so-and-so, because how many times have I seen people say, it's because Archangel Michael contacted me. And I think, why are you so special? I mean, why not everyone? If it were like that, why would Archangel Michael contact you specifically? Just because, like, well, I have a relationship with... No, I mean, divinity is something much simpler, I think. I think it's so simple that the universe wouldn't put steps in the way or require you to join this religion or that belief system, or else it doesn't work. It's something totally intuitive and natural, and you have to have faith in yourself and discover yourself, right? There is something inside us, we have to discover it, and that's where I feel that we can't, well, we can invite, we can provide information, but it's a step that's personal, that someone has to say, yes, I want to discover who I am, and then somehow it starts to come to you. In my case, it's very much through intuition. Intuition is very hard to explain because it's not necessarily visualizations. Yes, sometimes, but they're not visualizations in my head, in my mind. They're feelings. It's something you feel. So if you discover that feeling and you discover where we come from, that's why I say this game would be over. This game would be over. We would get there to the astral and it would be like, no, gentlemen, I mean, don't try to sell me anything, but I'm calm. I'm not angry. Don't try to sell me anything because I'm not going to buy anything. So, because if they're going to try with religious figures, with family members, with your guilt, remember you did this, remember you did that other thing, now you have to go make amends, now it's your turn to suffer, you made others suffer, now it's your turn to suffer. None of that is true. It doesn't work that way. We've been given this idea of karma as a punishment, but the Creator never punishes. You said it very well, a wrathful God who punishes and rewards. He rewarded us with creation and never punishes us. He simply loves us unconditionally. So for me, that's the Creator, but we want him to be like, let's see, help me out here. No, help yourself, trust in yourself, discover that strength within you. I honestly believe, and I want to tell you that anything you set your mind to, you can achieve if you believe in yourself. But I feel, Peter, that we've been so strongly programmed to think that you're small, that you're a victim. That's another thing. Let's get rid of the victim stigma. If you're a victim, then you have to. You have to ask the higher being and even the government. Without the government, you're done for. That's why they show us movies like Mad Max and so on. What would happen if governments fell? Are we going to kill each other? Who knows? Maybe not. But this whole idea that we're small and always dependent on external things, that we can't do it ourselves. And I dare say that you don't need anything external, that you only need to discover yourself.
That's right. Just as you mentioned, the system is designed to underestimate us, to lower our self-esteem, to tell us directly or indirectly that we are insignificant. And on top of that, they build these enormous cathedrals to make you feel even more insignificant. So there is a negative bias in the information they give you, in what you see physically, but that's why these regressive entities went to great lengths to create a stage for us to identify with everything that is outside. That's one of their main strategies. As you mentioned, the issue of addictions is related to attachments. Attachments are one of the major manipulations. That's why the first thing they'll use when you die is to tell you that you left your mother, your child, your possessions, your things. So of course, but then they'll say, I'll help you go back. The quantum entity will tell you, now you'll be fine and live in harmony. And if you want money, I'll give you money and pleasures too. That's the deception. But we are not from here. In essence, we are not from this prison, and we have to learn to play in this prison until we get out. But we have to know the instructions of the game, which is exactly what the system doesn't want us to find. And it's important and crucial to know this. Well, there are many testimonies published on the YouTube platform, various cases, both of children and elderly people, experiencing this liberation, understanding in what ways they created their own economic, emotional, or health complications in whatever area it may be. These creatures were behind it, these beasts were involved, and the goal is to break that agreement, that contract, that pact, whatever we want to call it, that is conditioning us. Once it's broken, then it's up to the human to maintain the connection with their essence, with their light. Why do I mention connection? Because we have a fractal of that essence within this avatar or physical body, but the other large percentage is trapped by these regressive entities. And here comes another world, another countless number of ways these entities manipulate, not only the human's physical body, but also the human's light or light aspect, which obviously exists in a subtle dimension. That's what we see in session. To put it into perspective, to truly understand it, change your perspective on reality. And the goal is not for you to believe this, but simply to investigate, to search. Because if you are still suffering, still experiencing disharmony, still having health problems, and you've tried everything, from allopathic medicine, from what the system offers, from new age approaches, from any perspective, and nothing has worked, then you have to go further. You have to look for the cause, the etiology. That's what we do as natural medicine practitioners, as naturopaths. But you also have to work at the interdimensional level to go deeper into what is conditioning that person. Because no matter how much a person adopts proper nutritional habits, takes supplements, vitamins, nutrients, the raw materials the body needs, the archontic entity asks, is the agreement still in effect, or does it start to adjust the devices, the implants, so that, okay, if I wanted to cause a pathology in the liver, now I'll damage the kidneys instead. So the archontic entity adapts itself. When a person starts to wake up to rebel, of course it doesn't want them to get to that point. The entity doesn't want the person to wake up, to seek answers, or to get close to a certain truth. It doesn't want that. It will put up every obstacle, every stumbling block, and it will do so right before you try to free yourself. For the same reason, we've spent hundreds and hundreds of lives incarnating.
That is correct, Patrick. We are more or less at the time we typically broadcast. And before I ask if there is anything else you would like to add, I would like to ask you whether the interdimensional regression service can be conducted remotely, for instance, through a platform like Zoom, or if that is something that is exclusively available as an in-person service in Chile.
All possibilities are open. In fact, in many of the published sessions, you can see that the work is done online. We serve many people around the world. There are even people who might have some doubts. For example, I tell them to send me a voice message on WhatsApp about their experience, what they're going through. They can also request an evaluation, and we talk via Zoom or Skype, and they tell me what's happening. Then we determine whether it's something purely physical, biological, interdimensional, or if there's any direct intrusion from these entities. So that guidance is also provided so the person can have clarity about why these situations are happening. There are basic health complications where it might not be suspected, or the person might not suspect that it could be something interdimensional, but it can be. Why not? Just as there are more extreme cases where people send us audio messages telling us they turn off my lights, I see an entity, a shadow in the house, objects are moved, I hear a voice, someone blows in my ear, they open the curtains for me, direct paranormal activity. These are the same regressive entities causing it, provoking it, even up to exorcism. They simply change the staging, but it's the same creatures behind it at that level. So I tell people to watch the sessions that are published so they can understand the dynamics. If you want more details, you can contact the information that will be left below the interview. With all our love and dedication, we will guide you, we will support you, and this is important information that needs to come to light now.
Thank you very much. I am quite certain that a great many people, because yes, many times, as I was saying, there are individuals who are essentially just drifting along, let's call it that, throughout the course of their lives. They don't understand because even though they're trying, they're still taking care of themselves physically, looking after their health, taking supplements, exercising and everything, and yet they still have issues. And sometimes we compare ourselves. It's natural. We're human. You see someone who doesn't, it seems to us that they don't take care of themselves at all, and yet everything is perfectly fine, right? And there are people who just seem to be lucky, and well, sometimes there are explanations behind that. We should never blame ourselves because I feel that sometimes we fall into self-blame, thinking, well, I must be doing something wrong. No. Sometimes there are things you don't even remember, things you did in another life, in another situation, under different circumstances, and you've already done them and you just have to leave them behind. This idea of breaking away is often misunderstood, as if we were now playing dirty, and I say, no, these are things you did, confusion and all that, and now consciously you say, I'm no longer a part of this. What I promised you, I release myself from it. I no longer promise it to you. And there are many situations that maybe are for another conversation if you want, like all the lineages. And I've been told you have to cleanse your lineage, your family lineage. Well, I'm not responsible for all of them. I'm not here to fix the world. It's like they want to put that burden on you. No, Patrick, it's everything. Like 3 generations ago, there was a massacre there. So
it's suddenly this new age thing. So you never get to the root of the problem. So the archontic entity is so calm with that answer because the person says and assumes, no, my issue is karmic, or no, it's transgenerational, or no, it's the lineage. Of course, the person stays there, accepts it, and that's it, but doesn't investigate any further, not realizing that there's manipulation behind it, that there's an archontic project, that this particular person has to live life after life by their own request, petition, not agreement. And what comes out of that is truly shocking. So of course we can talk about that in the next interview, and we can also show what people see in trance when they face these regressive entities. They report seeing reptiles, gray beings, dragons, insectoids, Metallians, and lately, beings that are supposedly benevolent, like Pleiadians, Arcturians, or Antarians. I'm not lumping everyone together, but we need to be cautious because,
Of course, discernment.
there are associations between those entities and the regressive ones.
That's right. Yes, I understand you. No, you're not talking at all. I mean, that doesn't mean
Correct.
that there aren't already beings of another kind. Well, thank you very much, Patrick. Thank you so much, really. Honestly, I really enjoyed the conversation, and I hope we can have you back soon to talk about what you mentioned. Yes. I would love for you to share some testimonies about how these beings are seen. And yes, the beings you mentioned, definitely some of them, they're... In fact, maybe I'll tell you a story about a dream I had with an insectoid that appeared to me there and told me, I'll tell you about it there. And it said to me, stop now. And I said, I want to keep going. And then it sent me back.
I'm going to leave you with the bad experience. Possibly the same insectoid that caused your car accident.
Yes. Yes, probably that's right. Yes, that's how I thought of it. Well, thank you very much, Patrick. And yes, I'm going to leave all of Patrick's information down below in the video and as a comment. And if not, as always with all the guests, just write to me if you have any questions about how to contact him. Thank you all very much. Have an excellent day. Thank you, Patrick.